Hello there, everybody. I think that we're live. I'm not quite sure how it sounds yet. Let's get chat pulled up. See if I can't get that on screen. How are y'all doing today? Hope everybody's doing well. I'm doing well myself. Excited. I hit my 1,000 subscriber goal. So we are well on our way to success. Okay, there's the chat box. Now, I think if I understand how OBS... Yes, Caleb, you are in fact first, my friend. If I understand how OBS works, and I spent the last 12 hours trying to figure this out, I should be able to click a few buttons and get chat on screen for later. That way we can lock in Caleb being the first one here. Okay. Edit it down. Congratulations, Caleb. You get to be here while I learn how software works. Oh, yeah. Go ahead and let me know if that's legible on your guys' end. To be here while I learn. Stream's going to take a bit to buffer for me. But yes, welcome to the chat today, everybody. So my goal this evening is to, well, give everybody a state of the channel update. I know it's been a little bit since I posted. I'm sorry about that. I have some personal issues at home, and my computer just basically died for a minute there. And I'm back to it. I've got a small video I've been working on for the last few days I'm going to put out, and then I'm going to get back into researching that hit point video. The downtime without the computer allowed me to really dive into and look at a lot of the weird stuff behind the hit point video. You would expect it to be pretty straightforward and kind of easy to understand, but no. That would be too easy, if you will. Uh-oh, I think Discord kicked me from the call. Thank you, Discord. I'll just rejoin it. All right, anyway. So yeah, the hit point videos had a lot of weird twists and turns in it. It's kind of strange because you would expect it to be very straightforward. There would be who came up with hit points first, and then they added it to D&D, or if D&D came up with it first, that's where it would have been invented. But because of the lawsuits that happened around the early editions of Dungeons & Dragons, everybody claims to have invented it. It's very epic, Discord. Everybody claims to have invented it. And it's weird because Gary and Dave both would have had to invent the thing. I'm leaning towards Dave took an idea from Gary and refined it, and I'll explain why in the video. But whoever invented it kind of has claim to an important part of D&D. And that part of D&D would mean that they kind of get ownership, and because Gary tried to cut Dave out of the game, and Dave sued him, Dave needs to have invented hit points so he can keep his rights to the game. Unfortunately, both the creators are dead now, so I can't ask either of them. And the only people who would still know don't want to speak ill of the dead, and they're also very wrapped up in the politics of the early RPG community. On top of the fact, you might say, well, do we have any records? Well, when Lorraine Williamson took over, she's the word who did the hostile takeover from when first edition and second edition came out. She basically destroyed all the early paperwork that we had because they wanted to make sure that it was a corporate product, no longer a personal product, and she's one of the reasons that Gary never got back into D&D. So, yeah, trying to figure that out's been just a time and a half. But I shall persist on. So, while I'm here, I figured I should answer some of the chat's burning questions. During this live stream at any point, if you have a question you want to put up, go ahead and throw it on the screen, and I'll try to answer it. I don't want to get too personal here, but any questions about fantasy or anything related to my life, I'll gladly answer it now. The plan for the live stream is to go for about 2 hours or so. That'll be 9 o'clock my time. I figure it's a good time for enough people to cycle through, and everybody can really, get a feel for what's going on here. And if anybody has any suggestions on how to make OBS work better, I will gladly take them. My expertise is in fantasy gaming, not in live streaming products. So, the small video I'm working on that's going to coincide with the main video stuff is one I promised a while ago, the how to world build with kobolds. I love kobolds. I think they're so highly underrated. And I also think they kind of got the shaft in early versions of the game. They basically were just worse versions of goblins, which is strange because goblins are like the worst thing ever. But until they really hit the modern age, they really haven't gotten anything unique. I want to help with that. I think that we can, as a group, develop the most iconic versions of the kobolds. I haven't seen it yet. I think that Chris Zito, who's played in what was Takahata's game with his sister? I forget the name of it. But his kind of almost dog, almost dragon-like kobolds are, in my opinion, the best looking ones so far. I don't think the personality is quite there. So I think if we can keep pulling from different sources, we can eventually create the perfect iconic kobold. And then after that, I'm thinking I'm doing a bit of a mashup. I want to maybe do some multiple monsters all at once. How do I world build with minotaurs and vampires? Because I feel like minotaurs don't take a whole lot of effort to world build with. You've basically got 2 camps. You should do adding a bot to the chat so it doesn't connect. That's a great idea. How do I add a bot? My friends with any bots. Let me hide that so I don't dox people. Fantastic idea, Caleb. You know what, actually, I'm going to switch the stream source to my server. By the way, if you're not in my Discord server, you're welcome to join. Hello, James. You're welcome to join. And while I'm here, it'll give us this disgusting, lovely cream color. But it'll stop kicking me from the call. So that'll work until we get other people to sign up. Boom. One. There we go. That's the, you gotta love it. There we go. Yeah, we can sit here with the You're So Lonely bot for a little while. That'll be fun. All right. So yes, like I was saying, I want to do a bit of a mashup where I would try to world build with a bunch of monsters at once. Because I don't think something like the Minotaur needs an entire video about him. There's only really 2 ways to world build with a Minotaur. Either you're going down the ancient Greek monster route, or you're doing your own thing completely from yourself. If somebody has other ideas for how to world build with Minotaurs, I'm excited to hear them, but I feel like that is really the only 2 camps out there, and I don't think it's worth an entire video. Whereas something like kobolds, I think there's enough meat on the bones, and there's been enough people who've tried to world build with them that I should talk about them. So another thing is, since I don't know if everybody in the YouTube channel has joined the server yet, I have been working on my own tabletop game for a few years now. It's called Enos. I've mentioned it in a few of the videos, and it is nearing a state of completion for the core rules. Oh, you want to talk about goblins, James? Certainly. Goblins, I think, are one of the most interesting little fantasy creatures because there are so many ways that they're done, and every single person kind of keeps some of the core concepts the same, kind of like dwarves. Everybody's dwarves are slightly unique, but they're all basically still dwarves. Like, very rarely do I look at a fantasy world that has dwarves that I'm like, oh, that's a weird dwarf. I've never seen that before. No, it's very still identifiably a dwarf. Goblins, I think, are the same way. They're always these little nasty monster creatures. And I don't like this idea that I've seen a lot of modern takes on them where they're trying to make them, like, friendly. I don't think that fits for the goblins. Now, I do think goblins need a little bit of help in the monster department, but I think they should be focused on, like, what makes them monstrous and unique. Just because they're monstrous, though, doesn't mean they can't be playable. In my setting, for example, goblins are defined by their selfishness. Just because a creature is selfish doesn't mean it's not still worthy of protection and attention. So, knowing that, I keep the goblins as kind of this, like, almost chaotic, selfish race, but they're not stupid. They won't backstab their friends. They don't backstab and go after the local authorities. Hence, they're allowed to live in cities. I don't think goblins would fit very well as an intelligent Skaven faction. I think goblins need to be very individualistic, personally, James, solely because look at how goblins treat each other. Look how they treat themselves. They do terrible things to each other. And to allow your setting to still have that makes sense. But again, this is if you want goblins playable. I think there's no problem with going the Pathfinder route of making goblins these little monsters that are just terrible and love fire and love destroying everything. That's also fun. I also find it interesting that a lot of different settings have given goblins this tinkerer identity. You have World of Warcraft, which makes them basically just gnomes, but, you know, with explosives. They can do a lot of tinkering, a lot of designing, and they are really good at this Magitech stuff. Pathfinder has goblins dig through trash piles and find different trinkets and nubbins that they use to make their own things. I also like that aspect, and I think that personally, if you would take something like Warhammer 40k's orcs, the way their technology works, that could apply to goblins very well. I don't know if they still need all the psychic powers behind them, but the looks of it, the ramshackle nature, I'm pretty sure this is going to explode and kill me before it gets to my enemy, that's something I think goblins would definitely keep in line. It also gives them a nice niche in the world, because if the goblins are like these psychotic creators, you totally could have goblins be the guys to invent guns. In fact, that's something that I've toyed with for a while. James says, true, I was thinking of having possible of an Emperor Goblin as the main antagonist, a Goblin who runs a big coalition of tribes and try to raid a gold city. You're more than welcome to do that in your own setting. Your own world and your own society is fully within your control. I'm not going to tell you how to run your games. My goblins don't work like that, though. They cannot unify into big enough groups to have an emperor. To me, an emperor needs to rule over lots of nations of goblins. I could see a tribe, maybe a handful of tribes, but nowhere near what would I consider a goblin emperor. Now, a goblin calling himself the emperor, 100% I could see that happening. Goblins are, little weirdos like that, where they would take titles and claims and basically demand rights from people. That I could totally see. I also think it's fun, though, when goblins think and act like that. Now, the idea that they want to raid a gold city, I also think that it needs clarification. Gold is a terrible building material. Yeah, goblins are way too backstabby. Exactly, Caleb. They totally would betray everybody else. I don't want to dox anything, but there's James, you would know from the game that we play, the idea that the goblins wouldn't immediately just stab everybody else in the back, that, hey, there are 32 of us here, we're going to split the treasure 32 ways. Well, if we kill one guy, now we have to split it 31 ways. That mentality would be very strong for goblins, and I don't think they could overcome that. The idea of, well, if I just kill this guy, my reward goes up, and we already got the loot, so now it's just better, that's, to me, too driving of a force. The goblins would need something else that drives them and pulls them in a direction for them to do this. So, back to what you were saying with the goblins, with the Gold City. I think Golden City is something else I want to kind of pull on for a little bit. A Golden City sounds really cool, but man, gold is a horrible building material. I don't know how you could do it right. I've long been personally trying to figure out how to make gold, well, worth having in the setting. Because I think the idea of building an object of gold, exactly, Caleb, just like the beginning of The Dark Knight. I think building a city of gold is cool and it looks neat, and having all these golden objects everywhere is really cool. But the problem is, why wouldn't you have things made from like adamantium or mithril or silver even? Silver's way more practical because werewolves and fairies and all these random creatures have like, I don't know, say what the opposite of is vulnerabilities to silver. So silver would be way more valuable than gold, even though gold is more rare. The reason gold is so valuable now is, hello player 556. The reason gold is so valuable now is because it's hard to get. And if you want to have a magical setting that gold has some value past that, I think that'd be fantastic. One thing that I've been thinking about for a while is gold is some sort of, oh, well, thank you, Not Alfarius. I really appreciate the super chat. Let's give a round of applause for the first super chat. Much appreciated, my friend. Goblins are supposed to be wretched, self-destructive little guys. No way they'd be able to have a proper empire. Also high. I completely agree. That's what I was saying earlier, too. I think goblins they love killing each other and love just being little jerks to each other way too much for goblins to form unified kingdoms. Like, goblins to me are like herding cats that you've lit on fire, just going all over the place and being utter chaos. I think they function fantastically as like a raiding party or a group of bandits, but making an empire without somebody stronger to whip them into shape, I don't see it. That's actually where, if you look at D&D, hobgoblins really strive from. Because hobgoblins are related to goblins, but they're much more rigid and lawful and militaristic, kind of like the Roman Empire in a way. Except way more brutal, they literally whip goblins and force them to do things, which functions really well in the setting and kind of helps drive everything towards, well, the way that you can have these goblins that, fight armies. Otherwise, I don't see the goblins ever doing anything to go out of their way. I also think goblins are very lazy at heart. I think that they really would much rather just sit there and seethe in their own, self about how everybody's out to get them. They're like the barbarians of the era of the time, but almost Flanderized. Yes, I agree, Caleb. That's another fantastic reference. Maybe I should do goblins next. We're having a lot of fun talking about them right now. But yeah, I guess goblins are getting added to the docket after I finish this hit points video. But yeah, I think goblins are great. And I wish that they were in a bit of a better state with fantasy. Outside of Pathfinder, I really feel like people are ignoring goblins. Which is strange to me. Because, you'd expect them to be very easy to pull from. It's almost like an acceptable enemy that you could just throw anywhere. But you also can have fun just making them kind of like these chaotic, goofy little creatures. This is what Pathfinder does. So having both at once, it's like a gold mine that nobody's tapping into. Thank you, NNN. Tell your girlfriend I said hello. And thank you for giving me my time. And we got a super chat from Blackaroni. All I can afford, but ooh, my boy did it. Thank you, Blackaroni. So Blackaroni and me actually are on another podcast together that we do Sunday on his channel. It's called Black Screen. He talks about different movies and different IPs that are related to storytelling. It's been a lot of fun. Unfortunately, we've been stuck in the Godzilla show for a little while, and there's some problems with the Godzilla community. But we're going to move past that, and hopefully it'll be good. Player 556, goblins should be slaveholders. Oh yeah, I could totally see goblins taking lesser races as slaves. The idea of them taking gnomes, I think that's a great idea. Because goblins are just a little bit stronger than gnomes, so I could see them really relishing in the fact that they can abuse them. But also, gnomes are smart enough to know that they don't need to physically fight the goblins. They can outwit and outclass the goblins. And James says he's going to see Dune Part 2 tomorrow. I'm really looking forward to it. It's okay. So something to remember about the adaptation argument. I don't think that adapting something is necessarily bad if you change it. A great example is The Shining. The Shining is one of the worst adaptations of all time. However, it is a fantastic movie. I think that people get really wrongfully hung up on the adaptation side of things when they really should be focused more on does it fit the themes of the story? Because the themes and a lot of the ideas in the Kubrick Shining are still there compared to when Stephen King wrote it. So yeah. Also, The Thing is another fantastic thing. Well, The Thing is another fantastic adaptation, argument. It's way less like the book and the movie it's based on, and it's really a tense and fantastic film. And if it's good, it's good. Now, there are some issues with the Dune adaptation. That's just, unfortunately, from it being in modern times, but it seems like a lot of the things haven't got as bad as I was told, which is always good. Now, Not Off Area says, on the subject of City of Gold, Call years back he did a campaign that majors causing a gold crisis that devalues gold so much they need to get it out of circulation. That's a great idea. I think that, especially with diamonds are a thing in D&D that should definitely be for, because like every major restoration spell requires diamonds and diamond dust. I think that having a stranglehold of the diamond mines and restrictions to getting gold is totally something wizards would do, especially since gold, wizards, like you said, devalue it. They can just make everything. They could make statues out of gold. Yeah. And that's also true. That would help explain why D&D gold coins are super way less valuable. I actually fixed that in my setting. They don't actually call them gold coins. Like, I call them that in, parlance just to help keep it easy for people. But in my setting, all the currency are called sovereigns or crowns. The idea is that a lot of the merchant guilds throughout the world got together, and they agreed that they were tired of all these different countries devaluing their currency. And they understood that each king and each ruler wants to show their worth by putting themselves on a currency. So they had a standardized set of weights and testings done, and they told all the kings and the rulers from the different lands, hey, print your coins to look however you want. We'll ship it. But we will test your coins periodically. If we find that you're devaluing your currency, we will just cut off all international trade to your nation, and you'll starve otherwise. So nobody really screws with this merchant cabal. And the cool thing is, because of that, all the different currency denominations have special names. Like instead of a $1 bill or one coin, that's a baron. Either a 5 or a 10 would be a count. A $20 bill is a duke. And a 50 is a king, and a 100 is an emperor. And I think that is, a lot of fun, and it really adds something cool when you just say, here's 2 dukes. It just feels right. It makes it feel more like how currency should feel. Plus, it allows people to go find coins in ancient tombs that are really old and really cool and still be able to spend them. It always bothered me how in Skyrim you'd go into a Nordic tomb that's been buried for thousands of years and come out with a perfectly shiny brand new coin that everybody accepts as the same value. And thank you for joining us before dinner, 556. I will talk to you later, my friend. Thank you for the congratulations. But yeah, I also find it strange how, like you said, coins in D&D are so much less valuable. It's such a strange problem they walked themselves into, and it's solely because they made a player-facing economy, not a economy that's realistic. That's one of the issues with a lot of the early RPGs. They don't know how they should structure their games. You have a lot of people in the simulation camp where they want an RPG to simulate the real world or a world as much as possible. This is where something like Traveler really does well. You go play Traveler or you go play any of those types of games, it has the world simulation done very well. But the player-facing side of things is a little bit more obtuse. It's a little bit harder to get into. I like Traveler, but building a spaceship in Traveler is way more work than buying a horse in D&D. Yeah, I get a spaceship's more complicated, but all the little fiddly bits and all the little things that happen along the way are great for making the world feel alive and realistic, but kind of strange from a player perspective and abstracting the rules. First edition D&D was very much in the we're going to be a world simulation thing. The reason the players used to always be poor in first edition is you had to pay your armies of soldiers. Then from there, they kind of started adding in the ideas that magic items became what players dumped their money into. Beforehand, you had to find all the items in the world. Now you could pay for items. And if you could pay for items, why would I ever pay for a soldier when I could just get an item? And that set the economy on a strange spiral in reverse, where it came much easier to just buy things and now became a player-facing economy. So you get something like Pathfinder, where it's $500,000 for a single, powerful sword, but like nobody has that much money. I don't think there's that much gold in the world to mint. Let's see. James says, this may sound like a stupid idea for a D&D campaign. What if the adventurers were drug dealers and fought monsters and went on quests to gain stuff for their gang? So I think that you're dealing with several things there. Like they cleared land to grow weed on or something. Okay, I think you're dealing with several thoughts there that are all like spinning around. And I think you could easily pull that into a tight, fun campaign. The idea that that the players are part of a gang or a group of ne'er-do-wells and they go out and do quests is a great one. I think the way that you could make this setting work is you'd have to find monsters or monster parts that would allow for seedy outcomes. And I'll just give you one from my setting. In my setting, trolls are different than you'd expect the other way trolls function. Trolls in a lot of D&D and D&D-like products really are just like regenerative ogres. They're not really special to me. My trolls, every part of its being is independent and it's full of hatred for you. It just wants to kill and it hates that you exist. It hates the living. So when you slice a troll off, its blood will sometimes crawl towards you. Its arms will go out. And my favorite thing, if you slice its belly open and its intestines come out, they wrap around you like snakes and try to pull you to pieces. The reason I bring this up is the trolls are used for like some very, very low-end magic items. You can make like very, very risky health potions with troll's blood. That's something I feel like a gang would do. Because the reason is, if you drink one health potion of troll's blood, you'll get a stomach ache, but you won't die from it and it'll heal you. But if you drink too many, you get too much troll's blood in your system, and the troll's blood coagulates and starts to reform a troll. So the troll will eat you from the inside out. That's something I can see a gang totally doing. Selling cheap health potions that they've cut with troll's blood. Now that's a really cool fantasy way a gang would work. Plus, this is why the players were hired. The gang wants you guys to go kill a troll so they can make a crap ton of money selling troll's blood potions. Because if a health potion's $100 and they could make a troll's blood one for 10 and sell it for 50, they're getting 5 times the amount of money. And they get to undercut everybody, so they'll be selling like crazy. Plus, you don't typically drink health potions in town, so any adverse side effects would only be felt way too late to understand that it was your fault. It looks like Caleb has the same idea. You could go to dungeons to get ingredients. And I think that, dungeons could be a gang war. That's another fantastic idea, Caleb. Could you imagine that? Clearing, it'd be like that old Godfather game where after you cleared out all the different gangs on the map, you had to go break into their strongholds and do a complete dive in and break it down and kill all the guys inside. You can imagine that, how much fun that would be as a dungeon dive. Instead of going through another dusty cave or another ruined temple, we're going to go into Al Capone's house and we're going to, cap him while he sleeps. That would be a lot of fun. So essentially you're saying to not do errands for their own gang, but have me working for a gang they don't run. Perhaps you eventually have them run it. Well, I'd say both, James. Something important that I would focus on is how do the players join the gang? There are several ways about it, and I think that different systems might function better for this. For example, Cyberpunk would function fantastically for a gang about, hey, I want to start a gang and start really low power and build your way up to it. Cyberpunk is very easy to have, players basically suck, and the first time somebody gets a pistol, it's outstanding. Whereas if you look at D&D itself has a bit of a power scale issue. You don't need swords. Like a level 1 monk, if somebody plays a monk in D&D, they will just absolutely ruin any ideas of, players don't get a lot of equipment, which is necessary for them to be part of a gang. However, if they work for or with the gang, then that's a bit different. Eventually, they can get roped in and pulled into the gang. I don't want to cite any specifics because, I will get in trouble for mentioning certain fun actions from the government, but there are certain times in history where people who were innocent joined gangs because they were forced into it by restrictions or attacks that the government did upon them. That's actually why there's a lot of, how do I put this? Bald people with special views, if you know what I'm going for, in a lot of the Northeast, because they get forced to by the government. They get beat down, they get their ridges attacked, they get their farms attacked, and the only people willing to help them are the bald guys with the funny tattoos, so they naturally fall into that group. You could have that be something how the players join this gang. The local government is maybe super oppressive. I've always had an idea for a part of the setting where there's a king who has an incredibly high amount of taxes on people, so they jokingly call him the generous king because he has like a 90% tax rate on people. And then from there, you could easily spin it into the players join this gang because the gang's helping them out and the gang is giving them feedback. Alfaria says, I've long felt that thieves' guilds would make much more sense functioning like a criminal organization that just called themselves a guild due to their slightly more rules-based approach like the mafia. Oh, I completely agree. I think that the thieves' guilds are very underserved. I think that having like guild ranks is strange, and I think that you could do a lot of fun in that part of the setting. I think crime as a whole is very underserved in fantasy. I think it's only I forget Jane Fonda's book. I think it was hers, where they have an entire stories about yes, I knew you. That is a very good reference, and I think you caught on to what I was talking about. But like I was saying, I think Fonda has a story, Jade Empire, I think it's called. I forget, I'm sorry. It's been a while since I read it. But the story concept is basically there's this Chinese-style triad, this mafia, who's the leader dies, and now their three kids take over, and they're doing all this gang activity in this mega city, trying to figure it out while dealing with personal drama. That's like the only modern version of some sort of thief or gangster-related story that they've told in fantasy. And I look at that, and I'm like, why is that the only thing? Considering Fafhrd and the Grey Mouser are foundational. The whole reason we have the rogue class is because of the thief class from those two dudes. Like, we should have way more thieves and gangsters in fantasy. But we don't, and I think that's a complete missed opportunity, like Not All Farius is bringing up here. Now, James, you don't need the Cyberpunk handbook, but I'm just talking about the style of the game. It's D&D is very difficult to remove a lot of the power from and make the players suck. The only option that I would say for that is maybe have, and this would be tough, I would look online, maybe have a find a level 0 guide for D&D. I'm not sure how 5th edition would do that, but I think if you had some way to make the players level 0, so they don't have a lot of equipment, and then they get their first class level after they join the gang, that would be really cool. That, I think, would fit very well. This also means, though, that you would have people who would level up into clerics while being part of the gang. That's fine. Something I really want to push back on is the idea that your class needs to be like your personality. One of my favorite characters I ever played was a paladin who was an ex-pirate. He was just a normal pirate, killing, raiding, doing pirates' life stuff. And one day while he was Jack Sparrowing about, his ship got attacked by a kraken. And it was in the middle of the sea, and they were getting torn to shreds. And he prayed to the God of Mercy and said, please, I will pledge myself to you if you keep me alive. And then he lived. And he's like, well, crap, I'm alive now. And where did he wash up? On a monastery for the God of Mercy. So there's no questioning that the God of Mercy brought him here. So now this character who was a pirate pledged himself to the God of Mercy, and it's not that hard to grow up in a monastery not stealing stuff. Then the monastery said, hey, we need you to go out and do good deeds in the world. Go out and fight bad guys and slay evil. So now this pirate character is going out adventuring, and he's getting a lot of money, but he's also helping out poor people. And he's got this constant dichotomy where he just wants to kill these people and take their stuff because it's a pirate's life, but he also knows that he can't do that. And I argued with a lot of another player at the table, oh, you're not playing your character right because paladins have to be lawful good. And I'm like, but he's following the law and he's doing good. Just because he has a personal internal struggle doesn't mean he's not doing something good. So that's a thing to remember with classes. Now, if we got a couple messages, I want to go back up. Let's see. New You, Blessed Lieber for bringing in the guilds. Yeah. Oh, I think that's another video I really want to make. I want to go back and talk about all of the lost mythology and history from the early days of the RPG scene. Like the fact that we use Vancian magic, and if I say Vancian magic, most people in the audience are like, what the fuck is that? Oops, sorry, what the heck is that? It's a bit of a travesty. I think that we really should go back and understand, because Vancian magic is one of the coolest descriptions ever. So those of you who don't know, it's from Jack Vance in his Dying Earth series. This is where the entirety of magic for D&D comes from. If you ever wondered who's the guy who invented spell slots, it's Jack Vance. Because the idea is, at the beginning of the day, or whenever they can, wizards open their mind into the alternate realities, which is like hell and stuff. They find a demon whispering through reality, grab him, say his true name, and stick him in his skull. And that demon is what lets you cast your spell. So when you want to shout fireball and shoot a fireball, that's not you summoning forth fire and making it explode. That's you bringing the demon fireball from your head, allowing him to leave through your mouth, and in return, he will explode, and he gets to go back home for the day. Which is so cool. And I can see why Gary Gygax stole it and wanted that in his setting. He lost all that nuance, though, with spell slots. And I think that's a travesty, because how neat would it be if that's how magic worked in your setting? Even if mechanically it's the same thing. What happens if you kill a wizard before he casts all his spells? Do those demons all just go off at once? That'd be kind of neat. The guy that kills evil, sign me the hell up. Yeah, I like that too, Roni. I think that a lot of I hate spell slots. Oh, me too, Mael. That's funny you bring that up. My hatred for spell slots goes so deep that I ended up reworking the entire magic system from the ground up. Then I really just I wanted to make magic fun. I feel like magic is a strange system where you have to constantly push against yourself to not have things go terribly. And I don't like it. Let's see. So to go back to what James said, so make them super low level, and when they perhaps do something to the city, they get attention, the gang they get hired on. That sounds great. I originally had the campaign start. I assume you were going to say at a higher level there, James. Yeah, there's two options here. Either make them start at like level 3 to 5, and from there they go into like joining a gang because the gang wants to hire them on to do work for them, or have them really low level and basically be like urchins, if you will, who like nobody cares about, and they join the gang because the gang is a local get out of jail, or not get out of jail, get out of the hood free card. So you join the gang in order for safety, and from there you could spin it into all this cool stuff. That's at least how I would run it. So next, will you be covering Section N as I hear in the Iron Age circles? So I will eventually be covering some of the other sections, and trying to talk about Section N and all the different appendices in the back. I don't think that is as important because, first of all, like you pointed out, a lot of the Iron Age people have covered that. I want to cover stuff that's not listed there as well. Things that very clearly had an impact that nobody talks about. The great example is Kolchak the Night Stalker. I hope everybody is just as confused as me when I hear the words Kolchak the Night Stalker, because that sounds like something you shouldn't care about. And it probably would be if Gary didn't watch all of it. So the way I can describe Kolchak is it's a 1970s version of Supernatural, that TV show where they go out and fight monsters each week. Only ran for about 10 episodes from what I could tell. And Kolchak the Night Stalker really was an interesting concept because you see Gary definitely watched it because he references specifically the Rakshasa. Now the Rakshasa, the way it functions in D&D is because of the way it was killed in Kolchak. They are weak to piercing damage that is done by a holy thing. That's because they carved a holy crossbow bolt and shot it with it. That's nowhere in the original Rakshasa lore, but that's just because they happen to use a crossbow made from a holy relic in that show. Gary assumed that's how they work. And there's a lot of things. That's just every time I'm reading about like kobolds, blah blah blah. And they were in an episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker. Slimes were in an episode of Kolchak the Night Stalker. And it's like there's 10 episodes, and I want to cover that because I'm like, dude, that clearly is super important to the setting. Like nobody talks about this TV show that lasted for 10 episodes, and it's got to be important. Gary references it almost as much. I would say he references Kolchak the Night Stalker more than he references H.P. Lovecraft's work, and everybody talks about H.P. Lovecraft. See, Macaroni, I like that. My Rakshasa video, it's funny. That is one of my personal favorite videos because I managed to figure out how their hands work. That always bothered the absolute hell out of me of why they have backward hands only in D&D. And when I figured out that it was because of an art direction piece and somebody misunderstood a description, I was so excited. And the Rakshasa video is really popular. Whenever I go to Google and it says, hey, what are people searching for when they find you? It's always orcs, and then it's either Rakshasas or kobolds, depending on the day. So I think that that's a really fun fact. I, for one, adore the algorithm overlords. Yes, we love you, YouTube. I'm definitely not incredibly frustrated with the way you show my videos to random people. I love it. Although I will admit, I think I'm still number one in the English-speaking world for Rakshasa results. Like, because almost all the other videos are in, like, Bengali or Hindi or a lot of the languages for the Indian subcontinent. So it's just strange that since I'm the only English person talking about Rakshasas, I just get boosted like crazy. Okay, let's go back to chat. Yes, Caleb, I appreciate, that is awesome the way the spell slots work. I feel like that's one of those things where they just completely, shot themselves. Must be the thumbnail. Yeah, that Rakshasa thumbnail was pretty good. And I will say Half Day here is the guy who ended up making that for me originally. It's a banger of a thumbnail. So, let's see. James, off with the meeting, Lieutenant, given the task of being part of the organization. Yeah, that's another way you could do that, is have them be greeting an organization, and from there, it being spun into a way that they could actually join. That's also a good way to do it, James, for your gangster storyline you had as an idea. I think that both are completely valid, and it's kind of up to you and your players. That's the thing that I would say. Make sure that your story is set up for your players. Doesn't mean you have to, cave everything to make them happy, but if you know that your players don't want to, do anything, my players are the opposite. They love doing all my quests. But I've seen people online who say, oh, my players never accept my quest hooks. Well, then give them something that they want to do. If your players love money, then have somebody offer them an insane amount of money to go in. They're just going to do it if they do. And you don't have to have the guy pay them that much money. You are allowed to have one villainous character screw them over, but you should still have at some point them push for that. And I think it helps. It'll be a lot of fun. New You says, would be cool if there exists a soft magic system that's more dependent on improvisation than spell slots. It's funny you mention that. So I briefly mentioned earlier the way my personal magic system works. I don't want to get into too specific of detail until it's, ready to be published. But the idea is every spell has a certain cost, and you could pay that cost to cast it. However, I have worked out a class that I've called the Elementalist that basically functions like people from the Avatar universe, where you can manipulate an element. Earth is the easiest one to explain. You can lift up a certain amount of rock, or you could shoot shards of rock forward at people. The way I designed the entire system is results-based. So, because I feel like something like Pathfinder is a great example. They have a kineticist. The kineticist is based on, weird esoteric numbers. So you get a lot of very strange things where it's it takes two, let's just say spell slots. 2 spell slots in Pathfinder to be able to sink an entire ship, but it takes 3 spell slots to lift yourself up 5 feet. It doesn't make sense the way the kineticist works. So I went back and said, hey, I want to make sure that the class is set up in a way that makes sense. And as you are trying to cast your spells, essentially, you build up how much spells power you're putting into it. So let's say you wanted to shoot a fireball, you're a fire guy, and you wanted to make this the most powerful fireball level. Instead of 1d6, you wanted to do 10d6 damage. You can dump all your spell slots and all your mana, into this one big fireball, and it's a nuclear reactor that goes off. And just kaboom, it's gone. Or you can then say, hey, instead of doing that, I want to basically use like a laser rifle, targeting system, where instead of hitting all the guys individually, I want to shoot this guy, that guy, and that guy with with what would be a fireball level power. You could totally do that, and the costs and the way you design a spell from the ground up for the Elementalist is all written out in the class. I even got it down to a nice and easy to understand chart, so you can fully look at it and say, oh, wow, I want to do this thing? Well, this is how I should do this. And it makes it so much fun. In fact, I don't know if he's going to be here, but there's another person who said he might swing by in the chat tonight who's played this class, and I think 4 or 5 other people who've played the class really, really love it, because it's one of those things where it's tough to, when you've played other classes in the game, to go back to them, because just the sheer freedom they get. Now, I will say, they can't do everything. If you're a fire guy, you can't just cast like healing spells really easily. I need people to explain that to me. That's well, thank you for all the hearts and such, guys. And I think that, that's one of those fun things that you can, do when you're designing it. And there's another class that's not going to be in the core book when I get it done, but it's called a Rune Lord. And the Rune Lord, the concept is, I think, super cool. You speak sentences, and those sentences become spells. For example, let's say you wanted to cast a fireball spell. You would speak the words fire, explosion, range. So now you have a range spell, fireball. But what if you wanted to light the fireball off at your feet and hit people near you? You would say fire, explosion, self. So an explosion of fire would come around you. And the Rune Lord, as he levels up, gets more words. And you can learn more words to fully customize the way your spells work. So you can just keep speaking different words and having it. So instead of fire, explosion, self, you could have ice, explosion, self. Or, ice targeted self. So you now can shoot yourself with an ice spell. Or maybe ice protect self, so you can protect yourself. That class is still in the beta concept, but I fully think that that's going to be, when I can get to the advanced book, a complete killer of a class that a lot of people can appreciate. But it's going to take a little bit of work for me to get there with that. Unfortunately, I need a little bit more time. Oh, yeah. I think that this is going well so far. I kind of expected a little bit of a train wreck, not going to lie. I spent hours today trying to get this live stream chat thing figured out, but we ended up getting it good. I would like to thank everybody who's shown up tonight so far. It's been a lot of fun in chat, and I want to thank everybody who's helped me get this channel to the way it is. I know it's a cliche, and you hear that it's a cliche all the time, but I literally wouldn't be here without everybody. I'm very happy with the fact that 1,000 people have shown up. And I think we've got a good little community here. And if you're not part of the Discord yet, feel free to join. What are your thoughts on the Rule of Cool or Shad's video on it? So I haven't seen Shad's video before, but I'm going to assume Shad doesn't not make some incredibly stupid version of the take on the normal Rule of Cool. So the Rule of Cool, for people who don't know, it's the idea that you should sacrifice the way that the world works and some of the more logical bound stuff as long as it's a really awesome moment. I think the Rule of Cool works very well for home games at times. I think it's terrible for when you're dealing with much bigger setups, like Marvel movies shouldn't really rely on the Rule of Cool. Now, the reason I say that is because that is a professionally produced product. It's much more important for that to function cohesively, because as it sets itself up, it's going to cause things down, for the rounds. It's going to cause people to have issues further on with the story. I will also say, though, the Rule of Cool is something that you should try to focus on when you're writing, when you're designing something. If there's a moment that you're desperate to have because it's super freaking cool, then go for it. There's another piece of the Rule of Cool that I would say is important, and that's to make sure that the Rule of Cool is followed if you think it's going to be kind of goofy. One of my favorite lines ever is from a Gloryhammer song, where it's Zargothrax the Wizard rides into Dundee on his undead unicorn of war. that is some of the goofiest stuff I've ever heard, but that is such a cool image. An undead unicorn of war? Who comes up with this? But that's really cool. That to me is when I hear the rule of cool, that's what I want. That's so goofy and so weird to say an undead unicorn of war. But that's really cool. And that's why I think the rule of cool strives at. Now, when it comes to player characters, I think this also depends on like settings. In my settings specifically, the players are playing heroes. Heroic people should be allowed to do a little bit more than the average person. And we also, this is usually done for, well, good action movies. It's also done in that aspect too. The first John Wick movie, he takes way more damage than a normal human could and still be alive. But there's consequences. He's still stumbling. He's still taking damage and moving around and being hurt. I think that's a good thing. That keeps the rule of cool of John Wick being this utter badass and kicking everybody's ass, but also allows him to still feel realistic. Now, something else I would like to bring up on that is Die Hard. Die Hard, again, John McClane takes way more damage, but he still kind of goes out. He still gets hurt. You still expect him to, suffer the consequences. So that's, I think, the key for the rule of cool. The other thing is, if the players want to do something really, really, really cool, like, let's say, jump out of a 200-story building and slide down the slides because they're a monk and they get slow fall, you can let them do that, but there has to be a cost. Maybe they use up all of their monk key abilities, so they can't use any monk stuff for the rest of the day. Maybe they take damage on the way down, so they lose some health. Maybe they break an arm because a rock hits them. There's a lot of... I heard a partial complaint of Blue-Eyed Samurai was walking off a footage with a limp. Yeah, you see, exactly. That's fantastic, reason to think of. It's unrealistic because the world has set itself up in a way that you'd expect that to happen. Look at Lord of the Rings, for example. I don't ever see Aragorn or Gimli or Legolas getting tired from killing orcs. Even though anybody who's fought in any reenactment will tell you, after about 5 minutes of swinging your weapons, you're freaking tired. Wearing all that kit is very, very exhausting. But we allow them to have superhuman stamina because it's cool and interesting. That's a good use of the rule of cool. And just like James said, John Wick is a pretty cool movie. And just like Not All Farious said, the first John Wick movie, it's a believable rule of cool. He's, getting hit, he's down, he's, suffering, he's got a breath. That still fits within the world. I understand what's going on. I can look at it and say, man, this is cool, this is what's happening, and I accept it. And New You's right. The Incredibles is also a good example of the rule of cool. It's all about making sure that people buy into the thing. You cannot have a moment that just takes everybody out. And I will admit, some people are a little bit more sensitive to being taken out of things. A lot of people will say that when they saw Force Awakens, they got taken out of it. Even though I don't like it now because I know what it leads into, but I will still think that Force Awakens was not, at the time, a bad movie. It's only bad upon retrospect and watching because you realize just how little was actually set up, just how slapdash it was. And I think that's a good example of the rule of cool going wrong. Even though there's a lot of other problems with that movie, it's just easy to point out for that one. Now, if only 1,000 people could watch live. Yeah, don't worry, Alfarius. We'll get there. More people will come through. I think we've already had 30-odd people watching today, which is fantastic. To be fair to Lord of the Rings, the characters do get grimy and sweaty. It looks like they're getting worn down at points. Yes, and I agree. And that's the thing. It's paying lip service to that idea and showing you just how cool and powerful these people still are. That's good. That's important that you get to see that because otherwise it would completely take you out of the setting and out of the world. And I think that having that is very important. And it really helps a lot. I think we have another person joining us. All right, who's ready for all of the audio stuff to break now? Hello there, Des. I don't think he's ready to quite start talking yet. But like I was saying on the rule of cool, yes, Black Rooney is right. The John Wick is a good example of justifying your rule of cool.
I'm sorry, I was 30 seconds back, so I'm trying to make sure I'm actually there. I also can't hear you through Discord. I can only hear you through the stream. Oh yeah, there's also the delay. Lamau.
All right, you should be able to hear me now. And I guess people on stream tell me if we're getting double shot through the stream. I'm not quite sure how it's going to work, but we're going to find out together, everybody.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to figure it out.
It's...
I see your rule cool criticisms, and I raise you Mace Windu taking down an army of super battle droids with his fists. That's all. Yeah.
I'll actually go on to that one for a sec. The reason that works there is because that show is not literally what's happening.
Right.
It's shown that shows almost an in-universe exaggeration of what's going on. And that fits with the rule of cool because nobody ever references that as something that needs to happen. It doesn't actually... You can hear both of us? Excellent. All right, Black Rooney says we're good.
Now I just need to open your stream and then mute it so I can see what chat is saying.
Yes. We need to vibe with chat.
Of course.
Yes. Everybody's saying hello to Struck, though. They're all happy you're here, buddy.
That's great.
So, yes. I think that going back to the rule of cool, you can justify it very easily. And that's, I think, what bothers me a lot is I think it's a great idea to say, hey, I want my climactic battle to be this. And I'm just going to spoil something for you guys. A story that I have been working on for a while. The climax of the story is there's a soldier, the main character's name's Justin. He's basically a Roman hero. He's fighting against Alaric, who's another hero that grew up with him. They went through basically the Roman military together, and at some point, Alaric decided he was going to go back with his people who were more like Germanic, if you will. And now Justin and Alaric are fighting in a big war together or against each other. And the battle is taking place. Well, hang on, it's not that it gets better. The battle is taking place at where they scored their first victory, where 20 years earlier they felled the great frostworm Grimscythe, and across his bones is where they're having their duel. Dragons in my setting, when they die, they never fully decay in power. So the whole battlefield has got this thin sheet of ice, and you can see the frost on their breath coming off as they're going around. That, to me, is a super awesome scene where they're meeting there at the site of their first battle they had, and they're going to fight on the bones of a frozen dead dragon. Wow, what an awesome scene. That's totally really cool. Now, I got to go back and when I'm writing the story, earn that. I got to go back and pull it and build upon it and make it function right. And, I see you, Black Rooney. I'll talk to you later about the scroll. You have a good one, my friend.
I was just gonna say that mainly the fact that you said Alaric, right? Or
yes,
Almer. Yeah, I was like, I've been listening to about the end of the Roman Empire, and I was like, that sounds very Germanic, like a very Gothic Germanic name.
It is. And where do you think I got Justin from?
Right, exactly, of course.
My ideal fantasy story that one day I'm going to tell is going to be about a kid named Tancred. Or Tancred, as his name should be pronounced. And you will one day find out. I don't know how much of the First Crusade you've gotten into yet, but once you get there, you'll find out all about my boy, my favorite Crusader.
I haven't got into in terms of Anna's account. I did read one book about the Crusades, but it was pretty brief on each Crusade.
Once you start learning about it and you read about Tancred, best Crusader. He just has a great time. Everybody else there is miserable, and they're being terrible people, and they're like eating children. And Tancred's there just like, I'm going to go conquer Jerusalem, Nazareth when nobody's looking. And I'm going to win like 4 different major battles that I should have lost and become the main character. And he even like tries to protect the Muslims from the Christians, and they like burn his banner just, because they're jerks at that time. Great character.
What about isn't Baldwin is it the 4th, the leper one? Isn't he also pretty?
He's from the Third Crusade, not the First Crusade.
Oh well, yeah. I guess I should have specified. You're right, because you're talking about First Crusade specifically. Yeah.
And Tancred's uncle is Boyman, and you've definitely read about Boyman.
Oh, Boyman.
That's his uncle. Oh. So, like, think about it. That's your uncle. Is that foxy dude, and who?
Yeah. Good old boy
Yeah.
mod.
So
Yep.
when you've read about how I think Anna does talk about Tancred because she mentions how Boyman has sexy nephews, that's Tancred.
Oh, that's funny.
Yep.
So not Alfarius, if I'm pronouncing that. I'm sure I butchered it. Either way.
Right.
Um, so I assume you're probably thinking of when in the same little short where Mace Windu beats up a ton of super battle droids, he then also takes on the super thumper. I don't know how to describe it other than a big thumper. He takes his lightsaber and then drills a hole into it to blow up the whole thing by just going in and slashing the command. I assume that's what you're talking about.
Dubstep droid.
Yeah, yeah, the dumb
All right.
strap droid.
Just before we continue, James, thank you for being here. I appreciate you showing up, and I will talk to you later, my friend. So yes, again, I really like the animated Clone Wars that Tarskowski did, but I feel like it's got to be fictional. You obviously cannot take it as 100% what happened, but it makes General Grievous so cool. I've never been more scared.
Grievous is so cool in it. That's the thing. Like, I also like, unless of like the more rule of cool, I do like in part two. I don't remember what the exact season two, whatever you want to call it. The second part where it's after, like, I really like the Anakin getting knighted scene. I think that genuinely has some like, it's got some good stuff just with like him. Just some quick dialogue that's really good, and him being
That whole
like super
show's
happy
got
to be
incredibly good dialogue, considering it doesn't have
Yeah.
like, any for a lot of it.
Right. And for the second part, what I think is also really great is also just where what Anakin's vision, like in the cave, where like it says nothing, but it kind of shows his whole journey. But instead of using normal people, it has I don't remember what the people on the planet are called. Whatever it uses like the native species and like using it like the more tribal, like literally like Native American paintings, and then like going through it, and then of course also just the fact that like the whole story with that is like just like the story of Vader, because he's the men of the village are all captured trying to fight the villain. They all become monsters. They all lose their arm. They're the same arm Anakin lost, of course. And then afterwards, who's the one who greets them back? It's their, the first one to greet back their father is the child. When all the women are afraid of, the monster that, all the men have become from the genetic experimentation. It's really cool. I really like it.
I like it too. I think, like you said, it's very on theme, and having it on theme is really beneficial. Yes, he did kill Jedi Padawan Shaggy. By the way, that is his canonical name, is Shaggy.
He misspelled it, but yes. And in terms of Shaggy, that's a nice segue. Tomorrow we're going to be watching Scooby-Doo, the live-action one. So you should join the server.
This is true. We will be watching the first live-action Scooby-Doo this week, and then next week we're going to watch the second live-action Scooby-Doo. Every Thursday from 5 p.m. to 7 p.m. Eastern Time, we do a little movie night, and other people are going to start hosting movie nights too. We're just trying to build up the interest. It's going to be a lot of fun.
Alfarius knows exactly what I'm talking about. That's what I like to see.
Exactly.
Yeah. Like, he kills everyone around him, which are supposed to be like Jedi, and then he kills the wife, who was like, helping him get the stuff away from his arm. The arm initially makes him powerful, but then the arm kills everyone. Yeah. It's really cool.
And the other example he brought up there is Baron Munchens and Falstaff. Great examples. So, I'm glad you could join. I was
watching,
doing my best here.
right before I got here, but it took a while.
It's all right.
Before I could actually join.
We have been, we had some fun trying to figure out how the stream works. We are 10% better.
I saw. Yeah.
We are 10% of the way there.
Good.
So, man, I am beyond stoked, though. I got a new phone.
The streams seems to be going well. Even before I was here, like figured out all the issues more or less. So.
Oh yeah, we figured out the issues, and we've been having a fantastic chat. And Player says he might be able to join us. He's got a new phone for the live action Scooby Doo. I am both looking forward to and dreading that because man, those are some movies.
They are some movies.
By the way, for those of you who haven't joined yet, last week we watched Tenacious D and the Pick of Destiny, and
that was.
It's a great movie. I love that movie so much, and I'm really glad that I got to show a lot of people.
That
server
was the
link.
first time I saw it. It was so good.
Do you mind grabbing the server link for me, Des, and posting it in the Discord chat and the YouTube chat? If not, I can try to grab it. It might break things.
Shoot, I might not be
Hang
able
on.
to do that.
I think I got it.
You got it? Cool.
Uh-oh. What the heck happened there?
It was funny too, because that was also great. Because there was the movie, and then afterwards, just everyone chilled and hung out, which was just nice.
That's another thing. The server is very, very friendly, and a lot of people are just vibing and hanging out. I will say that I've been in a lot of Discord servers throughout the years, and this one has got a very good vibe. I've got some good moderators I've put in charge there. I like you guys a lot.
Yeah, you like us until you see what we type, and then you don't like us.
All I'm going to say is I picked you guys so you could handle the problems, and I don't have to deal with them.
And you haven't had to deal with any problems so far. I will have to say that.
That's why I picked you guys. I figured you guys could handle it, and I have enough other issues that I don't need to worry about running the Discord. So y'all can,
yeah.
So, yes. I think we're going to go for another 50-odd minutes. Oh, I'm excited, though.
Right? 2 hours?
Yeah, about 2 hours. Yeah. And this was very successful. I had a lot of fun. I think that I'm going to try to do this again next week. Same time, same place. Really? Yeah. I think this was fun. It allowed me to get some of the conversations and basically give people updates on where the videos are at since it's been a while. And I feel like it'll help everybody kind of know what I'm working on, what I'm stuck with, and maybe I could use, chat here to help work through some stuff.
Get some ideas and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, and I also think
more a weekly thing. Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking. And I also would love to have chat here to help me with besides just brainstorming stuff, finding sources. Because, man, oh, man, it's been a pain in the butt to get some of these sources.
Maybe one of these guys will be Hungarian and will be able to speak Hungarian.
Well, somebody in my comment section actually did that.
I know, that's why
it was so exciting. Yeah. I was stoked that guy went out and was like, hey, actually, I speak Hungarian. I'm like, what? He's like, not very good, but a little bit. Like, oh, please, tell me about the chicken guts man. I need to know about him. I was so not disappointed. One day, they're going to invent a universal translator, and I can read about the chicken gut man.
For now, you have to be a cultured Hungarian to know about it, I guess.
Soon, though. But other than that, I think let's talk a little bit about the modern state of fantasy. And I want to push back on a couple people thinking that it's Gustavo Fring. No, if you didn't see my last video half day, he's the chicken man. But there's an orc who is like a big Hungarian fantasy character whose cloak smells of chicken guts. And yes?
I do have to say, I have been told by many astute intellectuals in the modern day of fantasy that, do I want to finish this actually?
No, let's finish the chicken guts man. Yeah,
he's the chicken guts man.
Yeah, he's like a terrible person. He complains about how much he hates all people. He constantly complains about like how he's got to go to work and how he just wants everybody to die. But he's like a nice person at times, and like he's like, oh man, I hate my life. Nobody loves me, and then he's got like a group of friends who love and support him, and like he's he kills the dude and he complains,
goofy,
oh,
yeah.
I dented the helmet, this sucks. Now it's worth less money, and I can't even fit in his shoes, my feet are too big. Like, this is a hysterical character, and I'm so jealous that I can't learn about him because I don't speak Hungarian. I'm just looking at him like, there's a gold mine here. I will have him one day, but not today.
Look, you could just realistically just pay go to Hungary and pay like $5 to the nearest Hungarian man, and he'd translate it.
You just lied to me.
He just okay, you got me there. He would just lie to you. Actually, you pay him $5 and he'd mistranslate it.
Just fucking lie to me. You're like, yeah, sure. Yeah. It says he loves chicken guts. You got it, man. $5 more. Yep, I definitely can read and write. But yeah. So back to the state of modern fantasy. I think modern fantasy is in a weird place. Everybody thinks it's in a bad place, but I actually think it's in the best place fantasy's ever been. The difference is you can't look to the mainstream. Mainstream fantasy's gotten very stagnant and very dull. But this is actually a lot like fantasy in the 70s and 80s, where everybody was trying to copy Tolkien, and nobody could figure out what to do. And it's not until the 90s when you have basically Drizzt come out that and Vampire the Masquerade is a tabletop game that revolutionizes the way fantasy works. And I think that we're in that stage right now where the mainstream is still very much stagnant and trying to copy each other, and they're trying to insert things that don't relate to fantasy. There's a mainstream fantasy. Yes, there's a lot of mainstream fantasy other than Baldur's Gate right now. I would say, D&D as a whole, first of all. And when I say mainstream, Pathfinder is still technically mainstream fantasy. They've been doing a lot of weird stuff with their plot lines there. That's completely changing stuff. There's that Sword series. There's everything that Amazon has decided to take and bastardize. The Wheel of Time and Witcher and all that. The way they've been writing that stuff.
Well, it is absolutely necessary to make the only person who cared about the series to make him leave. It is absolutely vital to the health of The Witcher.
One of these days, I'll get you, I'll get Maz, I'll get a Pag on here, and I'll just let you boys tell me how they ruined Wheel of Time. It'll be great.
You're mistaken. I know nothing about Wheel of Time.
Okay, good. I know enough about Wheel of Time to know that they definitely ruined it, and it's funny because Wheel of Time is already agrees with a lot of their ideals. I don't get why they had to ruin it.
I saw I think I don't remember which chap. I did see the Pag and Maz complaining about it, and then also being like, dude, I agree with them anyways. What are they doing? This is so unnecessary.
So it's funny you bring that up, player. That's actually my point. I was going to say, surprisingly, anime has started to really get some interesting stuff going on in fantasy. Because Not Nefarious says, everything in the West is still very much the make it like Game of Thrones. But,
yeah.
Oh, poor guy. Knew you.
I push back a bit on that, because I feel like anime has, I don't know, maybe it's just, what I'm seeing, but I feel like anime right now is, somewhat experimental, they're just willing to do stuff.
That's what I'm saying. That's why it's going interesting.
Yeah, because especially with anime, a lot of anime also likes the fantasy setting, the pseudo, 13th century type stuff.
Sorry, Nicholas.
So I don't know how surprising it is, but it is nice to that there is another avenue of fantasy stuff that's pretty good.
I gotta bring up a thing. 5 years ago, almost every anime fantasy show was a garbage isekai. I'm sorry.
Yes, I will. That was
a few years ago. I got it. That's why I said surprisingly. It's just all of a sudden they've decided to stop with this and started saying, "What if we had interesting fantasy shows again?" I guess there's only so many times.
You're actually right. I forgot about all the isekais, but you're right. It was just isekais out the wazoo. You're right. I forgot about that.
I agree. Most anime is crap. But my point is, we're now getting the decent, good, and peak stuff that's coming out right now, and it's actually worth looking into. And you're going to see that happening. That happened a lot with superheroes. The reason My Hero Academia was so big isn't because the story is just that revolutionary. It's because the West has absolute garbage superhero stories. They suck over here lately. So no smack. My Hero is going to be better. It's obvious that you could watch My Hero and enjoy it. All it has to be is one step above mediocre for it to be worthwhile. And that's what I'm saying with the fantasy stuff in Japan right now in the anime. They're the only ones who seem to be saying, well, what if we told an interesting story? The story of Firen is the most interesting fantasy story, just from a plot synopsis, I've heard in 10 years.
Yeah, it's the things I've heard about it seems really great.
The idea of it's an elf.
I do want to watch it at some point.
The idea that an elf has to deal with the fact that all of her friends die because she lives longer than them is already just as a concept more interesting than another fantasy story about a hero going out and fighting bad guys, or a woman going out and proving her worth against a male-dominated society. Already.
I mean, how many stories, I feel like it's implicit in, elves, but, I don't feel like the concept of, all your friends are dead, and, you have, a very warped sense of, how long something takes. I don't think that many stories have, how many stories have really, fully delved into that idea?
Yeah. And that's why I'm saying
it's right for it, and it's surprising. It is kind of surprising that, the West hasn't done it sooner, because how long has the West had
elves came about from Tolkien? The whole idea that
right, so they've had 70 years or so to jump on this idea, and just no one has done it. Apparently.
And it's free real estate because Tolkien
it's free. Exactly,
Tolkien talks about the sadness of elves. The elves in all Lord of the Rings are super sad and depressed. It's everything's melancholic, and nobody touched that. Everybody just got let's give them big titties and make them hot, or. You laugh, but it's true. That's all people took from the elves. Let's make them beautiful.
I'm not laughing because it's ridiculous. I'm laughing because it's true, okay? Look, I have seen Hellion, okay? I understand. I know exactly.
So, I want to respond a bit to the chat. A new you, I've also heard that the manga has gorgeous panels, and I do want to look into that. Thank you, Pip, for the congratulations. I appreciate you, buddy. So, I think Not All Furious is correct about how the anime pipeline works. Even through the pipeline, though, we've been getting so much garbage lately in the West. Even the stuff that gets here is awful, but that's what was popular for a while. And yes, Nevis is right. Firen Mushoku Tensei, that sounds, I've heard good things about that. Unwanted Undead is another one I've heard about. I've never heard about Ishura, and Wrong Way to Use Healing. I've been sent some funny panels from that. And then, yes, Delicious Dungeon is another one. It's another one of those good elf girls who've come out
Delicious,
recently.
Yeah, that's what I've seen too. Yeah. Although Delicious Dungeon, I think, came out a while ago, from my understanding. Unless I'm just...
I know the manga did. I don't remember the anime, but coming out a while ago. But still... the anime that comes to the West is pre-selected. Yeah, and I get that it's a little bit pre-selected, but again, it's still garbage, so much of it. Look at how many isekais we get. It's
the
I hate
isekai
it.
market. And then also,
Yes, and Nevis is right. It is official D&D lore that it's just explicit how long elves live. That's a side note I want to bring up. I absolutely hate the way that the races age in D&D. It is complete nonsense. Humans live to 45 years. That's it. In old stuff. And elves live for 2,000. There's no way you could have a functioning society like that. Tolkien's elves didn't reproduce, at all. That's why it would work. And I think that for my setting, I want elves to live long, but not that long. For example, humans in my setting, basically, once you hit 80, your life is over, and that's where you start, dying. For me, it's elves hit that at 200. That's still 3 generations of humans that they get to go through. But 200 years is way more reasonable and manageable than thousands. Never mind stuff like Elder Scrolls, where there are people who just don't age. I don't know how old Neloth is. I know it's at least 1,000, but never mind all the other psychopath elves. We should get Tio in here to talk about Elder Scrolls elf lore. Insane stuff. Yes,
I
Goths
mean,
would be
200,
emo.
200 is a good amount because, like, I mean, think
Yeah,
of even how much stuff has happened in the last 200 years. Like,
most
people,
republics don't last 200 years, let
no, they
alone a
don't.
thousand.
Like, the only republic that I'm aware of that lasted around 1,000 is the Republic of Venice. Like, that's the
San
only
Marino's
one.
republic lasted the longest, but it's small
Yeah,
nations,
it
you
was
know.
so small that like no one cared about it. Like that was one that like
Still,
no one
like
bothered to
even
take.
so, if like that's what you have to look at.
No, sure, but I mean like the Republic of Venice. At least the Republic of Venice had like it was powerful. It was important until it got conquered. At least there was like a long period of time where the Republic of Venice was like proactively like doing stuff and like affecting the world where the Republic of San whatever like was just chilling and being like, please don't remember we exist. You know?
Exactly, it's ridiculous. So let's go back up to the chat real quick. Um, Half Day's right, bastard! Exclamation marks. Another one of those that I've heard great about. I love the Fable manga. Hope for an anime. I've not gotten to read Fable. I want to, get into that. I've heard good things about that. Not all fairies is correct that most of the elves you see are a couple hundred years old, and
So
outside of a few of 1,000. But
Nevis
still,
is correct. Like, yeah, it was like a maritime empire for like 500. I mean, like the Fourth Crusade only happens with Venice being the power that it is, and they, ironically enough, starting to get very powerful. Like he said, around 1,000, but especially becoming a maritime power from the. Ironically enough, we were talking about Bohemond, but
yeah,
his father's armada invasion is where the Venice starts to get power because they were helping the Byzantines, fight them off.
exactly. But yeah, elves.
True.
But I think modern fantasy is on a good state as well because even though, like I was saying, the mainstream stuff's terrible, and we talked about how Japan's doing well, a lot of Western stuff is still doing really well in weird spots. Go look at
How so?
OSR or OSE. That's the idea of the old school Renaissance with these weird books that people are publishing. There's some absolute bangers and really interesting settings and worlds out there that you just look at it and people are making RPGs for their worlds now. And it's like, this is fantastic. This is better than official content. And like by miles. And it just bothers me because you look at it like, why don't they just hire these guys? Knife here suck, get rid of him. I agree, my friend. Rock
So
and stone.
true. Right.
But yes, I think that I think there's going to be a lot of fun a lot of fun stuff coming up in fantasy soon. The rise of original non-isekai anime are back. Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I mean
Anime's
it's
really
nice.
starting to pull itself back together and really starting to say, "Hey, let's be interesting and worth watching again." And I don't know why there was just such a lull there, but you would think that Western media would have dominated during that time period because there's a good 3-4 years there with other than I think Demon Slayer, there was just garbage being produced by Japan. Or like it's already existing series that aren't going to really gain many new fans. That was
Right.
their time to strike, and they somehow squandered it. You know,
Yeah, I mean they're striking now, which it's still prime opportunity to strike. But you're right, there was like a 2 to 3 period where you're right. Other than like Demon Slayer, just mostly just
that's what I'm saying. Like you think that you could have put
same
anything out,
series.
you could have put almost any content out in the West, and it would have done good with nerd culture because there was nothing for you to compete against. But instead, they focus more on politics instead of telling stories, and now this is where we are. And it
Yeah.
really, I hate it so much. There should be no elves in your setting, not because they never existed, but because they no longer exist thanks to the better races. You know, it's funny you bring that up. The elves in my setting are a much more modern addition to the world. They used to live on their own little island called Norantis. that was kind of like their own paradise, and then it sank into the sea. And because it sank, they had to spread throughout the world really quickly and claim pieces of territory. And I think my elves are interesting because what I did to them is I made them very hoity, where they know that they're better than everybody. But instead of being like the typical high elf that you think like, oh, we're just better than you, so we should kill you and genocide you. No. I went as one of my players described the California liberal route, where the elves are, well, they think they're so much better than all the other races that they have to help all of them. We have to give the orcs jobs because they're too stupid to work on our race.
Yeah, that's so based.
So all the elves are very caring. They love other people. And it's like, oh, you don't know better. Of course the goblin has to steal. He's literally too stupid to not steal.
Oh,
and it makes all the other races despise them.
That's so based.
Right? And it's one of those things where it's aggressive
That's
friendliness.
Such a great idea. Oh my goodness.
Yeah, that's right. Shogun has made a splash. I am shocked at how good Shogun is doing. I have heard it is very slow, but, people apparently are super into it. I'm excited to check out Shogun. The 80s miniseries is great. The book is based on is great. You might like it, actually, Des. It's near historical fiction.
Oh, really? Interesting.
So I'm going to describe the plot of Shogun, the way it's told, by looking at American history for a second.
Is it? I'm sorry. Is it the Is it on Amazon? Is it the Amazon series?
No, I think it's FX's Shogun or Showtime.
Is it? Where is it? Because I think I saw something I think close to Shogun, or I don't know if it was called Shogun. I'm trying to think. I think I might have heard of it, but I don't know.
But I'm just going to explain the way Shogun is told by looking at the American founding fathers for a second, so you know the history. So instead of George Washington fighting against King George and Paul Revere, instead it's it would be David Davidson is fighting against King Carl III, and they're going to fight in the Revolutionary War for the freedom of America. And one of the big people who rides around and helps is Thomas Blatson. So it's one of those things where they change the names of these people, but they're still historical people, but they're not.
Basically the same.
Yeah, Tokugawa is a main character in the show, but they changed his name to something else, and it's one of those things why did you change his name? But it's also because they made him a different character, and it's really weird. Because Tokugawa in real life was very much more in the let me sit back and let me slowly push things towards the way I want it to go. Whereas in the show, he's beheading people and stuff. Oh, okay. And William Adams is the white guy who shows up in Japan in this time period.
Oh, it's on Disney Plus, I think. That's where I saw.
What? Late Night Losers says it's Hulu and FX. Well, yes, so Billy Samurai is a real person, William Adams. He's a real guy who crashed in Japan and if you want to get really into it one of these days when I'm drunk and I have less scruples, I'll tell you how it's because of the British that all the Christians in Japan were killed, but we'll get to that one day.
I've heard of that. I haven't looked into it at all, but I've heard of that. I have heard of that.
Yeah.
So yeah, it looks like it's on Disney Plus and Hulu. That's interesting. I'll definitely check it out then.
I do want to check it out myself as well. I think it'll be fun. I've heard good things about it, so I'm into it. Nivis brings up an interesting point. Dragon's Dogma 2. I have no idea how that game is going to do. It's either going to be the next. Didn't
the first one do good?
It did fine, but it's either going to be what's the newest Dark Souls game that came out?
Elden
Ring. It's either going to be the next Elden Ring where everybody buys it because it's supposed to be legendarily good and it lives up to the hype and everybody buys it because it lives up to the hype and they play the shit out of it or the stuff out of it, or it's going to be a disappointment and nobody talks about it. Kind of like Sea of Thieves.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Yeah. The only reason people talk about Sea of Thieves is the multiplayer was good and no one cares about anything else. And,
yeah.
People, as soon as you mention for more than 5 seconds, it's I don't want to talk about it anymore.
Well, you have a good night, Not Alfarius. Thank you so much for hanging out with us, my friend. It was good hanging out with you.
Yeah, I was not when I looked up Dragon Dogma. I was not thinking of what I was not actually thinking about Dragon Dogma. I was thinking of something completely
It's
different.
okay. But yes, Nevis is right. Dragon's Dogma is really good, but it's very rough. I would describe it, honestly, if you think about Mountain Blade, I think Mountain Blade is the closest I could consider to what Dragon's Dogma is. A fantastic game that's super unique, that's kind of developed on its own, that has a real big cult following, and everybody who talks about games like it loves it. But Mountain Blade Bannerlord came out. It was not the splash it was expected to be. And it's really strange because, like, I look at Bannerlord, it's by all measures a success, but I don't feel it has the cultural relevance that Warband did, which Warband came out in 2005, I believe. And I'm curious if Dragon's Dogma is going to suffer the same fate, or it just gets stuck in this perpetual okay cult classic syndrome. And where's the 1,000 sub play button? They don't do that anymore. I don't think they give 10,000 sub play buttons anymore either.
Really?
Yeah, I believe you have to hit 100,000 to even be considered for a play button now.
That's interesting.
Yeah, it's disappointing. I can't look it up right now, but if someone in chat or you want to look it up, that would be quite interesting. Because I'm pretty sure you did 10,000 sub buttons gone, which I understand, but oh well.
Yeah.
Maybe I could pay them to bring it to me. Dragon's Dogma was in development hell, like 60% of the intended content, and you can cut due to time for it. Oh yeah, I fully believe. The first Dragon's Dogma, every time I hear people talk about that game, it is absolutely hectic, the development cycle. And I feel bad because I want them to, do good. Obviously, I don't want games to be bad. But... but I, really think that it got the short end of the stick. So, 100K subs, yeah, that's the goal, my friend. That's the goal.
100K is the lowest one. I don't know what the other ones are.
It used to be 10. They got rid of that. Now it's 100K, a million, and I think 100 million is the Ruby play button.
50 million.
It's 50? Okay.
50. Yeah. So it says Custom Creator Award. Yeah. Oh, and then there's the Red Diamond, which is 100 million.
There you go. Make your own play button? That's not a bad idea. All right. Once I hit 10,000 subs, we'll make my own play button. You know what? I'll have Karka do it because he's a smith. We'll have him smith me up one.
Dude, that would actually be awesome. That would actually be cool.
All right, so if it's silver when I reach 100,000, I'll have him, because copper's easy to work with, I'll have him make me a copper play button for 10,000.
Oh my goodness.
It'll be behind the wall, it'll be custom made, it'll be fantastic. Then once I get my camera situation figured out, and I'll do a house tour, it'll be awesome. So, yes, thank you, Pip, for giving all the stuff here. The full breakdown. Silver when you reach 100,000 subs. Gold when you reach 1 million. Diamond when you reach 10 million. Red diamond when you reach 100 million, baby.
Yeah.
So, hell yeah. I'm excited.
Yeah. I mean, hey, when I met you, how many did you have? I don't remember. But you were like...
I think it was 300.
Now, yeah, 300. And look at you now. You got 1K. Like, that's awesome.
I know. I'm very stoked about it. It's going in the right direction. In fact, I believe I'm only 300 hours of watch time away from getting ad monetization.
Well, that's good.
So the next 2 or 3 videos, I should hit it. So that means this year, assuming that the video's going, have you already talked to the future of the channel? I have not talked about it much. It's a great point, Pip. So I think that the future of the channel, I think I'm going to live stream every Wednesday at the same time. If people want me to stream at different times, let me know and I can try to work things out. From there, the next big video is going to be the hit point video. With in between the hit point video and the now is going to be the Cobalt world building video. From there, I don't want to say I'm out of like ideas for doing the history ofs. I'm not by a long shot, but they take a long time to make because I want to make sure I'm meticulous. So in the meantime, I'm going to try to do a little bit more of content where I can just talk to people or talk to the, about like helping and ways for design, like more Game Master tip videos and more how to world build and tips like that are less research intense, because I feel like that content will help people a lot. And it doesn't require me to spend 20 hours tracking down a book that nobody's read before just so I can verify it's wrong. That's what happened to Mummy video multiple times. There's so many people who've talked about mummies before that I've spent times tracking down. Uh-oh. YouTube apparently broke. Hang on a sec.
Oh, no. You said one too many swears.
Up. I think it's back to fixing itself. Sorry about that, everybody. I got a notification from YouTube that it wasn't getting enough bandwidth. Somebody in the house must be downloading something. That's right. My man tried me the Metal Mythos of Fantasy. I really think that I want to. I think that unironically, when I look at Razor's videos on the Metal Mythos, I love that. I love that I can watch any one of his videos and they're never going to be outdated except for with new information. And he can't adjust for that. I fully believe that all of my videos that I've made on the history ofs can be watched by people 20 years from now. I fully think that when I can go back to, go for college stuff, I can use my own videos as sources because they're so well researched and all the information I got, I tell you where it's from, where the logic is. It's collegiate level work. And I expect one day somebody to use them in a fantasy class to teach things. And I think that this idea of where tracking our myths and our mythology has been lost. For some reason, after Christianity got introduced to the regions, we just stopped tracking mythologies. And it's not because of Christianity, it's just as an academic study, we just stopped caring. But we still care about like weird stuff. And I don't get it. These modern tales are these modern myths. Oh yeah, the history of hit points. Player, oh yeah, that video is gonna come out. It's a pain in the butt though. I keep hitting dead end after dead end as well because man, there's like I mentioned at the beginning of the stream, there are so many conflicting reports about it. And it's so hard to find a source that isn't just broken, because it's like, oh well, Dave Arneson said this, okay, but Dave has a vested interest in lying. So do we have proof? Because I can verify at least 2 of his claims of the 3 he makes are false, and I just can't get the other source that he claims. But it looks false to me. It has been very annoying. But I think that the hit point video, I will not be surprised if that one gets a lot of traction for the wrong reason on the channel. I fully expect people to throw an absolute fit about my research in that video. And that's why I want to make sure it is so heavily done well. Because there's been a lot of pushback lately in the RPG industry against Gary Gygax. I don't know why, but it seems like people, they don't want to cancel him. They don't think he's worth as much as people thought he was worth. And I understand that you don't want to have hero worship and put people on too high of pedestals, but I think he's been wrongfully defamed lately. Yeah, it is like trying to find where the modern computer keyboard comes from all its parts. It's one of those things where, like, it's so finicky, but I know that it's out there. And I know that if I can keep drilling down and slowly extrapolate from sources and pull back, the answer will be there. And this is one of those things where it will be fantastic to look back at once it's done. And I can say, I figured this out. I solved hit points, I've shown my work, and I've managed to show people, here's the ideas.
I mean, especially since it seems like, especially with what players saying and like with you're saying, like it's there's no clear and obvious way or like place where it's like, oh, this is the answer of where hit points come from. It's like, you know, a couple of people saying it, and whoever you believe is who you believe. There's not too much of a definitive like, oh yeah, we did the research and this is who did it type thing.
And again, like I said at the beginning, it's Nevis talks about it. There are some great criticisms of Gary. I think there's some very valid criticisms. I don't like the way he ran his business, but because of the way he ran his business, the lawsuits that were involved really, really forced people to have to make definitive claims in ways that I would not agree with. And then when Lorraine Williamson took over, she just torched everything else and said, "Figure it out later, boys," because they wanted to prove that nobody had any results in it. But people, I don't get why people hate Gary's ethics and worldview so much. He is just such a basically a laissez-faire, I don't care type of person. I cannot see why so many people hate, dislike him as a person outside of, business practices. Because the amount of vitriol he gets is insane. And I think it's related to a deeper seated issue that the culture, not just of gaming, but the culture as a whole has. It's like a jealousy for the guy who created it first, where he needs to be taken down. So it doesn't matter that he created it first. We shouldn't celebrate his discovery. You see this a lot with Columbus. They make up terrible things that Columbus did just to insult him. It's like, Columbus is noted as being not
I'm
a.
like,
Go ahead.
yeah, like from what I've heard, like from what I've seen, like there's a lot of like Columbus was not a great guy from my understanding.
No, but
But
like
like
they'll say
even with
stuff.
that, like but then they'll also like try to downplay his like discovery, and it's like that's going a bit far. Like I'm fine with like saying like maybe there shouldn't be a day about him because of the bad things he did or something like that. I'm fine with
Okay,
that
so
conversation.
Columbus Day only
But there
exists
is
because
like
everybody was racist to
it was
Italians.
because of Italians. It was
Yeah,
Italian. I know it's Italian. No one talks about that, but I know it's Italians. I've heard
yeah,
this argument.
yeah,
No one wants to talk about that either, but that's a completely different topic.
yeah.
But I'm just saying, like the general topic of like bad person, no day. But like the fact that like so many people want to like be like, oh, Columbus wasn't that big a deal. It's like, yes, he was. Yes, he absolutely was. Like you're out of your mind if you don't think that discovering the new world where this information is now like well known to everyone. It's not getting lost. It's not, you know, it's not
It's
some,
out there.
Norwegian guy who goes there and then, no one knows about it and no one goes back to it for like what, like 400 years or
400,
500
something
years
like
or
that.
whatever. Yeah, like like if you find it and then no one and then you lose it and it's gone, like good for you, but this is like you didn't really impact history that much because no one remembered it. But this was like everyone knows about it, the cat's out of the bag. It's fundamentally going to affect a lot of things.
It changed the
It's
world.
part of why Spain gets so much power so quickly is because they get, a lot of power and a lot of resources from it. Like whether you like it or not, like Christopher Columbus was an important man in history, very important.
And like you could criticize him, he was fine with
Yeah,
slavery, but like he also beat one of his men for raping a woman. Like it's very clear he had a moral line somewhere. Just because it's
right,
the wrong moral line being okay with slavery doesn't mean that you need to make up other things wrong with him. Just insult him for what
right.
he is. Yeah, you see, Nivis agrees, and it's just like Anu, you said, Gygax derangement syndrome. I don't get why people just want to hate on these famous men for like things they never did. Just hate them for what they did. They're
Yeah,
human. It's completely fine to criticize them. And the hit point video is completely wrapped up in that. And it's so annoying because everybody's got like the wrong opinion on everything. It's just so frustrating to try to deal with and try to break out. Yeah, his stance on slavery has been massively misinterpreted. Oh yeah, I agree. But again, like you can point to different things of Columbus as what's wrong. And Gary
Columbus
Gygax,
had
what's
things
wrong?
that wrong with him that like you can clearly point to, and people will still like. But like even besides like the things that like you can obviously point to of like things he did wrong, like people will just like try to downplay his accomplishment. It's like no, this was a big deal. like there's this weird like trying to cover up of like how important it was. Like, oh, it wasn't discovered. There was people here. It's like the rest of the known world, everyone was talking to each other except the Americas. When the Americas join in, like that's a big deal.
Yeah, we
Like
the human species were reunified.
it's literally the equivalent of like if we find an alien species for like 1500, like because no one was over that. You know that it. It's literally like a miniature version of like going to another planet and finding aliens.
Yeah,
You know, not as big as of course aliens, but like you know, just the fact that there's someone out there that no one knew about.
Well, first I want to say thank you, Snow Crow. I'm glad that you love the videos, and I love that you love them. And New You is completely correct. I actually do want to spin that into a greater topic real quick. People don't understand culinary history, and I think that's a bad thing because it always is funny whenever you look at somebody's fantasy setting and it's like, oh yeah, we basically have fantasy America and fantasy Europe, but we also have mashed potatoes. I don't think you understand. If potatoes existed in the Roman Empire, the world would still be speaking Latin. Potatoes are insane. They are like a literal superfood that is given by God to the people of the Andes. Remember, the Incan Empire is probably in the worst place in the world. It's on top of the tallest mountains that are rugged, and they lived because they had potatoes. Like
it's funny. I shows how, you know, bit of my age, I guess. But I remember for The Martian, game theory, not game theory. What's his name? Matt Pat did a video on like, could he survive? And in that video, he literally was like, yeah, with like potatoes and like you need potatoes has like all the nutrients and you need like I think the only thing that's missing is like protein or something. Like there's like one or two things other than a potato. The potato covers like 98% of what you need to live. And I was like, so wow, that's interesting. It's like, yeah, it's like, what is this doing on Earth? Like, there's this one food, this one God-given food, you know, nectar of the heavens that's like covers 98% of what you need to live. It's crazy. It is crazy. Gotta put it. Look, the fountain of life was discovered. It was the potato. No one figured it out.
But the reason I bring it up, and just like Never said, peppers, potatoes, tomatoes, sweet potatoes, maize,
it's
beans, fruit, squash. The thing that's really fascinating, just to show you, yams, you know, or sweet potatoes, are so important that there are West African and like Southwest African, I don't know, Congo, deities of sweet potatoes.
Really?
And
that's interesting.
You look at that and you're like, that means that the sweet potato got introduced to their continent. They grew in such abundance that they ended up making cultural myths about the potato, and they were convinced that the sweet potato and the yams were native to Africa when the Europeans showed up. And the Europeans like, but we remember bringing these to you guys.
Yeah, I mean, even
it's like fascinating.
Italians, like stereotypically, it's like pizza, spaghetti. It's like both of those contain tomatoes. I mean, for Poland, it's
spaghetti's
like
from China. Like that's
well, right, that too. But like ignoring that, I mean, like with the sauce, with like the pasta sauce. You know what I mean? Like, yeah.
But the reason I wanted to bring this up, and you know, Nevis, you're right. The soil you grow potatoes in is very important. And it matters a lot. And Player's also right. Potatoes and milk are basically all you need. Yeah. And you know, you can use coconuts as well. There are so many completely wild foods out there. And there's some interesting culinary hybridizations you can do that I feel like that is super lacking in a lot of fantasy content. Because just to put in perspective for me, in my fantasy world, there's a part that's called the Mictlan territories. This is close to like your Mesoamerican, South American type thing. They wear a lot of bright feathers. They have fire gods and such like that. They have, you know, tan skin. And their language they speak is a mix of Nahuatl and Spanish. You know, I know I didn't pronounce it right, but I'm very difficult at pronouncing Aztec words. There, they also have the only tobacco plants and the only rubber plants in the world. So because this is a fantasy setting, you'd expect, oh, well, there shouldn't be rubber at all. Well, rubber can exist. Because the only reason rubber didn't exist in our reality is because it's from South America. So we
Is
couldn't
it from
figure it
South
out.
America? I thought it was Africa.
No, it's South American.
South America.
Yep. And so it's like, okay, now that rubber is invented, that you have things like you've seen, hopefully the instant Legolas, the York Spurs, like basically it's a bow and arrow that you fire that's got a clip on it, so you can just keep rapidly firing arrows through it. His first version of that works with a single rubber band, and then he designed it without the rubber band later. But you could totally have a rubber band, and you could totally bend it in a way and make it work, and it's just outstanding. And yes, Nevis is right. You could make rubber out of poppies, but we know that till later. And it's one of those things where, like, just having rubber as a technology completely revolutionizes just the way the fantasy worlds should function. Imagine pulleys and trebuchets with rubber. You can do some really cool stuff.
I mean, yeah, it is interesting, like, just with the history of rubber. Like, we use so much, like, rubbery type materials, and, like, no one ever thinks.
It feels like sci-fi to have rubber, but really it's just fantasy. And another thing is having, in my setting, it took me, I think you saw, one of you guys may have seen my autism outburst when I was like, oh yeah, I figured out cigarettes. Because cigarette is just a French term for a baby cigar or a feminine cigar.
Really? That's
think
funny.
about cigarette. So
I don't know
knowing
French,
that,
so I don't know anything about French.
Okay, well that's I don't know how much.
I'm in an innocent state of mind. Okay,
it's okay. Well, I don't know how much you smoke, but like cigars, noble word. And then what gets called a blunt colloquially is also known as cigarello. It's styled like a cigarette, but it's made from the same way a cigar is made. So knowing that and knowing how cigars are just crushed up tobacco rolled in a tobacco leaf, you could have cigars, you could have pipe tobacco, you could have cigarillos. You can't have cigarettes though because you need paper. So if paper's not prevalent, you can still have everything else related to smoking. All the other uses of tobacco and nicotine. So knowing that, in my setting, pipe tobacco and cigars are prevalent. And I had a player join the other day who at the table, and they were shocked. Like, this is so weird that there's cigars everywhere. I'm like, why? And I explained it to him. Like, yeah, it's really cool. You never see fantasy characters smoking anything outside of opium.
One of the odd things. I think I had the same idea. I was like, it actually got me curious. I think because I don't know, like 5-6 years ago, I wanted to do like a D&D thing, and I was like, when would cigarettes? No, I don't know if was thinking cigarettes specific. I think I wasn't thinking cigarettes, more like cigars or. Like maybe a pipe or something. I was like, it'd be cool if my character had a pipe. How long have people been smoking? And I looked up, I was like, I mean, yeah, I guess that makes sense that it's been that long because, like, you're right. Like you said, like, what does it take? It's like, you just need to, like, know that the playing gets you,
it just affects you. And I want to point out again to something Anu you said. I did not know about the Jerusalem artichoke. I love artichokes. I think that's really interesting that it's another one of those superfoods that grows out and it's from Jerusalem. That's really interesting. I'll have to look into that. But I was going to say something else in your fantasy worlds when you guys are writing and developing stuff is the culinary aspect is so underutilized.
It is absolutely underutilized.
You can tell so much about a people by what they eat. The most miserable people in your setting should eat miserable food. That completely, as your human brain, you understand. If you go to the Viking town and all they eat is gruel and boiled lamb, you're going to understand why everybody hates their life. Oh, Jerusalem artichokes are from North America. That's interesting. I didn't know that. I'll have to look into them.
Interesting. Oh, from North America, too. Yeah, that's interesting. That's cool. I thought most of the foods, from memory, most of the, like, important foods were from South America. So it's interesting.
Well, I think corn and squash are North American.
Squash definitely is North American. Is corn North American?
Yeah. In fact, here's another thing. This is why culinary history should be in your setting. You can get such cool things. In my Mictlan territory, there's a story of the three sisters, and this is stolen completely from Native American myths. The three sisters are, they used to have a father that they really cared for, and they could never go out of their way to actually help him. Each one was lacking. One of the sisters, she'd reach as high as she could and take pieces of the sun for him to eat. but that wasn't enough. Then another one of their sisters, she'd go on the ground and she'd gather up different bits of dirt and use that, and that wasn't enough. And another one of their sisters, she would wrap it around the first sister and the bottom sister and try to grab what they missed in between them. And it's only when all three of them worked together that they managed to provide enough food for their father. And the three sisters' names are Corn, who reaches for the sun, Squash, who goes around the ground, and Beans, who stretches around both of them. Because in Native American agriculture, you grow squash at the bottom, corn at the top, and you have lima beans and other beans growing around the corn stalks.
Interesting.
Yeah. North America has outstanding food usage, and it's like one of those things where it's like,
Absolutely.
that myth is super neat and super cool, and why wouldn't you steal that? You've already got now three, just a really interesting fantasy myth, and you get to actually take a real-world piece of mythology that's not talked about often.
Huh. That's interesting. Nevis actually points out something that is very, very true. Like, a big reason for the Age of Exploration was, like, yeah, they just didn't want to deal with, like, the Ottoman... They didn't want to deal with, whatever, Muslim control to control the spice, the Silk Road. So they were just like, screw this, we'll find our own way. And they just were like, okay, well, we have two options. We can go all the way around Africa. And they're like, this kind of sucks. And it's like, can we
the
just
wind's
go
trying
around?
to kill us.
Yeah, can we just go around? And it's like, around what? The Earth? Oh, let's try. So, I mean, yeah. Well, and then of course, yeah. Once they got there, I mean, it's obvious just looking at European like foods, like the obvious cross-culture pollination. So, I mean, all the potato foods with
that's another thing. You can have such cool spices.
The Italians, yeah.
How like the idea that, and this is something else. There's so many like myths and stories in real life about people doing crazy things with spices. There's a story that Alexander the Great, when he was doing some like with his first conquests, his soldiers had run out of money, and he's struggling to pay for them. And he asked Zeus for like guidance or something, and he went to a plant and plucked it, and he found it was a mint plant that had 5 mint leaves, and he sold them, and it paid for his army for the next month.
That's
5 mint leaves? Like, I don't care if you're exaggerating. How much how much value is mint? And we have it in gum that sticks to the bottom of your shoe now.
Right, exactly. Yeah. I mean, that's what's so interesting is just like the abundance we have, and like it's hard to even imagine like thinking about like these other cultures in like back then, and it's like they didn't have, they couldn't just go down to the Pizza Hut when they were hungry. They actually had to have like, God knows what with
spices alone, and you're like,
exactly, especially with spices. Like they can't just go to the Kroger and get some paprika. It doesn't cost. It costs more than like $5 or whatever. It costs like $1,000 because they have to ship it from halfway across the world. That's crazy.
The first time the Dutch got to use nutmeg, it cost like 30 people their lives to get it. I can now get nutmeg by the pound.
Exactly, yeah. Like,
hundreds of Dutch people died to get nutmeg in the olden days. And it's just one of the things with like, that's to me a completely missed opportunity for fantasy stories. You can have such cool stuff with foods. And the other thing is, it's a great way to show off like, your cultures in your setting. What do they cook? What do they eat? How do they cook? How do they eat? And then I'll use another good point with agriculture.
It's also a good way to show off the culture, not only with like what do they, but like you were saying, how do they, what customs do they have,
There's
especially
a culture
if, like you want to include like royalty into it, like who does the king or duke or whatever, the spice must flow, who's what's the dining order, how, just so many things. It is interesting.
This is why turning food into buffs in your RPG makes it worth throwing lives at. You joke, but I have on my computer a file all about like cooking and like ingredients and how like it'll give you different boosts and buffs throughout the day. You joke, but the one day when I have enough time and have enough desire, I will make some crazy make my crazy food system available for people.
Doing the Monster Hunter
Oh, yeah.
system.
They did
gotta
eat
do it.
peacocks. Oh my gosh, yeah. Peacock is disgusting, by the way. If NNN is still around, he could tell you how nasty peacock tastes. But they ate that stuff. Ugh.
That's crazy.
But yeah, I think that culinary arts. You know what? Maybe that'll be the topic for the next episode of the podcast here. Next week we'll talk about food, and you are going to do that for the Monday game. I know you are, Goat. But I think that next week that'll be the topic of discussion, guys. Let's talk about food and fantasy. That's a catchy topic. That'll get the clicks. So it's, I think, a great time for us to call it. It's been about 2 hours. Thank you all for showing up and celebrating 1,000 subscribers with me. I really appreciate you all being here. Fantasy gastronomy, that'd be fun. That's gonna be fun.
Stop giving him ideas. You're gonna fill up his backlog already.
Exactly.
This is the first stream. He doesn't need 50 ideas already.
Don't worry, we'll do 10 streams in a row talking about all the food throughout the world for fantasy. So, thank you all so much for being here. I would like to thank all you all for just joining us, and please join the Discord server. We're going to have fun in there. I am quite active in there, and I gladly will answer questions and hang out. We're going to call it here.